One thing I notice a lot is guys, you're often wearing sunglasses in almost every picture. And for me, if I can't see your eyes, I'm swiping left. Can we talk about ghosting?
Ghosting to me feels very disrespectful.
Very disrespectful. On my profile is I list not the qualities I'm looking for, but I list what I am looking for in my life.
My messages to women don't necessarily wait. What's the worst that's going to happen? Is he's going to say no, or that he's with somebody and I'll be embarrassed for a moment and I'll move on, and he's probably going to be flattered.
So why did we decide to do this video talking about communication and how it relates to dating? So Anna and I are both communication experts, and we train people, leaders around the world to help them communicate better. And
we end up talking about dating a lot, right?
Yeah.
You're single. I'm not, but I'm very interested in dating and people finding love. It's always been a big interest. So I always ask you, and inevitably we end up kind of talking about, don't you wish? And we want to share some tips. Not that we know everything, but as communication experts, we have some ideas of how to set yourself up for success to find what you're looking for.
Yeah. So if you're curious about how to be better at communication in the dating world, then this video is for you.
All right, Rebecca, since you're currently on the apps, and I spent plenty of time back in the day as well, but I'm curious to get your perspective. What do you think people can do to stand out? Like, what can they write or do in terms of the pictures?
Yeah, well, one of the things I see most, and the thing that makes me swipe left faster than anything else, is that so often people don't write anything on their profile. There's literally nothing written there. Or maybe it's one line that says, I'm new here, I don't know what to write. And immediately I think, well, this person hasn't taken the time to work on their profile, so I'm not interested in that. So one of the things to make yourself stand out is to write a profile in the first place. Like, spend a little time. It doesn't need to take a whole day, but spend 20 minutes and just write a few things down.
Like what you're looking for, what else would you write?
Yeah, definitely what you're looking for, so everybody's on the same page. What I really love is when people list a few details about their life that gives me some content to push on when we are chatting, for example. So, for example, in my profile, I talk about how I love traveling, I love living abroad. I tell a really quick story about how I used to live in Japan, and I lived on the side of a river, and I would go cross-country skiing every morning in the wintertime. So inevitably, when someone reaches out to me, they will reference that line and they'll say, oh, that sounds fascinating. What part of Japan did you live in? And it gives them something to ask me more deeply about. So storytelling essentially is what we're talking about here. Storytelling helps you stand out because it's a detail that lodges in people's minds.
So avoid vagueness. First of all, write a profile and then have some stories. And so I'm imagining people might be thinking, well, then my profile is going to be super long. Like, what do you mean in terms of a story? The Japan story is just two sentences?
It's one or two sentences. Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion around what storytelling is. It's not a Disney movie, it doesn't need to be super long. You can tell a story in one sentence. And I just gave an example of that with the Japan thing. I also talk about how, for example, I love the black pottery of Oaxaca, Mexico. That's not necessarily a story, but it's specific
detail.
Specific detail. Yeah.
Maybe other prompts would be, what brought you to the city you currently live in? What about, instead of I'm a communication coach or I'm a doctor, like, what got you into that field?
Yeah. How, like, for example, what got me into communications teaching and coaching was I was an English as a second language teacher in Japan back in the late 90s. So I believe I do have that written in my profile.
Great. specificity, or as we say in communication classes, specific is terrific.
Specific is really terrific. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so that's the profile. I mean, just real quickly, any tips on the kind of pictures to choose?
Yeah. So one thing I notice a lot is guys, you're often wearing sunglasses in almost every picture. And for me, if I can't see your eyes, I'm swiping left just because I need to be able to see your eyes. I mean, they say the eyes are the windows into the soul, right? So, at least one photo without your sunglasses, please. Another thing, and this is something we talk about with our people that we work with in coaching, is your background says so much about you. And you can make a lot of choices with your background that help tell a story about who you are. And I know I did a podcast recently about dating. Someone was interviewing me about dating as a communication expert. And they really pushed back and they said, oh, well, you don't want to give off the wrong signal. Like anything you put in your background, people are going to latch on to that and tell a story about you. But the way I see it is you want to tell stories about you. That's the whole point of putting together a profile is you are different from all the other people out there. So the more ways you can show you're different, the better of a filter that's going to be for you to find the person that's a good match for you.
So maybe choose a variety of photos.
Yeah, choose a variety of photos. Know that everything in the frame says something about you, so choose wisely. If you don't feel comfortable with that, then maybe don't have anything in the frame. It's really up to you, but just knowing that I think is really important.
Interesting. Now, one of the complaints I hear from my friends who are on the apps, I remember this, is like we're messaging. So maybe somebody writes you a message and it feels like we're messaging forever. And I remember one of my pet peeves was the general message of, hey, how are you today? And what is it about the, hey, how are you,
I hate that
feels frustrating? That's not really what women or men really want.
Well, I mean, when we think about it, how are you is a greeting, and how are you has a rote response, which is usually I'm fine. How are you? It's just what we learn to say. So it doesn't come off as a genuine question. It just comes off as some throwaway greeting. So what I look for and what I like and what I do, what I practice is I ask a specific question about that person's profile, which, see above, we just talked about having some specificity in your profile so that people can
respond to.
Yeah. So, I saw that you grew up in Texas. Where in Texas did you grow up? Just making the response, number one, easy to answer, specific and tied to something that you've written so you know that person's paying attention.
It sounds like, too, a genuine desire to want to get to know the other person rather than just, hey, how are you? Maybe you'll respond. And, like really genuine interest in getting to know who that other person is.
Yeah. And also when you think about it, the how are you question, it can feel quite heavy. We all are very busy people and there's a lot going on in our lives. So when someone asks you, how are you, you're generally not going to tell that person how you really are, because where do you even begin? So
we don't even know each other yet.
We don't even know each other yet. Yeah.
Now, the other complaint I hear a lot is that sometimes men will stay messaging on the apps for a long time, where a lot of the female friends I have want to get out and meet each other or hop on a phone call. So do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of meeting as soon as possible. And I would say if you can have maybe 2 messages back and forth and then invite the other person out for coffee or, something that's low stakes, 30 minutes of your time. A story that happened to me recently is I messaged for probably 2 times with this one guy. And then immediately he was like, hey, let's go meet for coffee. And something came up the day that we were supposed to meet and we couldn't meet, but we decided to talk on the phone instead. And that was actually really great because we probably talked for 30 minutes and I realized I would be friends with this guy no matter how I feel about him otherwise. And I think we talked 2 times before we actually got to meet in person. But then it was interesting because when I met him in person, and inevitably they're going to be slightly different than their photos because photos are 2-dimensional static things. There is that initial feeling of, oh, he's different from his photos, but I already knew him. So I gave him.
You didn't shut down.
I didn't shut down.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is how he looks. So I really recommend if you can have a phone call or a Zoom call before you take the time to meet someone in person. It saves everybody a lot of time. And I think I can say for most people, no one wants to chat forever. Like, who has the time for that? And like, we have to ask ourselves, why are we on the apps? Like, if you're on the apps to chat, then go for it. But I'm not on the apps to chat. I'm on the apps to meet people in person.
Yeah. I also found it helpful to talk on the phone because there were a couple times where I talked to someone on the phone and I realized, oh, I don't think this is a match. And it saved me spending an hour getting ready, all that. And so we were both able to save time, save money. And so hopefully you find a connection and it helps strengthen that first date. But if not, then you saved yourself a date that maybe you wouldn't have had a good time on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and obviously you're married, you're not on the apps. But did you meet your husband on the apps? How did you guys meet? How did you get it started?
No, I did not meet him on the apps. I was on the apps when I met my husband, and I was feeling very frustrated and tired of it, like many people do. I met him through work, and I had the benefit of seeing him a few times, and I really saw how he moved through his professional life. I respected him. I liked him. And so we had that. And I felt that he was interested, but I didn't know. And so I actually took initiative in kind of a soft way where I said, hey, can I pick your brain on a topic that I made up?
Whoops.
Then we met and I pretended to ask questions. Oh, that was so helpful. And at the end of that meeting, he told me that he was single because I didn't know. And so I was like, all right. And I was expecting him to ask me out. Nothing happened. So a month later, I said, wow, your advice was so helpful. Could I take you to a drink? And he still didn't know what was going on. And then it was in the middle of that drink that he realized, oh, this woman is interested in me. Oh my gosh. And it turns out he was very interested, but he just thought I didn't have the courage, or I didn't want to, be a creepy guy at work. And so he was not, he says, I would have never asked you out. So my message is to women, don't necessarily wait, because sometimes you need to help things along.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once he got it, he took initiative from there on out. But it took a while.
Yeah, that's great. And I know sometimes I am guilty of waiting around for the guy to ask me out. And I'm also afraid because I can be quite intimidating, according to my mom. But I don't want to come off too strong, because there is the whole gender dynamics of like the man wants to chase and things like that we hear about.
What's funny is my parents told me the same thing. I remember telling them, oh, I'm going to ask this guy out. And they gave me a fishing analogy, like, don't, pull too hard. And the way I felt at the time, because I was so frustrated from dating apps, I thought, what's the worst that's going to happen? Is he's going to say no, or that he's with somebody and I'll be embarrassed for a moment and I'll move on, and he's probably going to be flattered.
Yeah.
It feels good when someone's interested. So if your intent is just, and men have to experience this all the time. And so I don't think that it should be men's role necessarily. I just think, hey, if you're interested in somebody, the worst that can happen is they'll say no. The best thing that could happen is you meet somebody great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they're really the right match, they're probably going to like that you're assertive, confident woman anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've gotten off the apps and now you're ready to go on a date with someone. What are some communication tips for how to get ready for that date and show up as your best self?
That's a great question. And I think it does start before the actual date. And I think it's about your mindset going in. It's very normal to you want this to be your future wife or husband. Or, I know I used to do this. You put a lot of pressure on it, but that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And so I think the reframe there is, I'm just excited to meet a new person today. You know, it might not be my future husband and wife, and that's okay, but I'm just going to show up and be curious and be interested in meeting this new person. That takes a little pressure off. You're probably going to show up a lot better if that's your attitude rather than, I hope this is the one.
Yeah. Yeah. So curiosity to bring that self-consciousness, that nervousness, that anxiety down a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the other mindset to have going in is just one of curiosity. You know, I think we talk about this in our classes that a lot of times in communication, we think we need to convince, you know, at work, like convince someone to do this proposal. And in dating, you might be wanting to convince them to like you or to convince yourself that you like them. And again, that's a lot of pressure. Instead, just be curious about the other person. Yeah. And if you do that, you can't go wrong. You know, that person's going to feel great. You know, it's going to be more interesting for you if you ask interesting questions rather than just going back and forth at a surface level.
And one of the complaints I make a lot and that I hear a lot from other women especially is that you'll go on a date and the guy has a tendency to talk a lot and he's wanting to share a lot about his life. And I don't think that's out of ego or anything. I just think often sometimes we're nervous and so we talk a lot. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah. Talk less, listen more. That is the number one way to stand out. I mean, I can remember still the few dates I went on where the person really was first and foremost interested in me and asking questions. You never forget it because it feels so good. And I remember oftentimes feeling frustrated in San Francisco that a guy would ask me a question, I would start to answer, and then he would immediately interrupt. Again, I think the intention was to say, oh, I've been there, or, oh, we have that in common. But it was like, oh, I guess you're not really interested in hearing because now we're talking about you. So if you do have something in common, great. Just hold off a little bit, make a mental note. And then when they're done, you can say, you know what? I've been there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bonus points if you listen to what the other person says, you respond and say, oh, I've been there too. And then later on, you go back to what they said. So remember you said that you lived in Japan. Tell me more about that. That is, for me, super sexy because I'm like, wow, this person's really listening to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember actually the moment I realized like this, my husband is the one. He had heard me. We were talking about seeing a movie at one of our houses, you know, fourth or fifth date. And he had heard me set, like the kind of TV setup I had. He had listened and realized that I needed a Roku. He went to Best Buy, brought the Roku over just in case I didn't have the right setup and installed it.
Husband material.
Yeah, that was really,
100%.
that was great. I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
So definitely listen more, talk less.
Listen more, talk less. I mean, and it goes back to the point about curiosity. Be curious about that other person. And if you're curious about them, chances are they will be curious about you. And then you'll have a nice flow in your conversation.
For sure.
Yeah. So a lot of people share with me, and also I feel this way too often, is that dates can feel like really anxiety inducing because you're meeting a new person, it's quite
an interview.
Vulnerable. Yeah, it's an interview.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for bringing that anxiety down on a date?
I mean, one point is to be curious because if you're curious about the other person, it's a little less pressure on you. So just show up and be curious. And then the second thing that I really like is the idea of not necessarily sitting across from each other. So where do we go on a first date? Usually we go to a bar or a restaurant where one, it costs money, and two, we're sitting right across from each other, and you may feel like this person's examining my looks and all my answers. But instead, if you go on a walk, it doesn't cost anything. And there's research behind this, that when you're not looking directly at someone, you might feel more compelled to open up and share more because there's not that pressure.
Yeah.
And I know that I try to do this with my children of like, they say that children open up the most when you're driving.
Yes.
Or when you're walking. And I found that to be true. So I think that same could apply for dating. Just go on a walk or do something that I used to be a runner and I dated some guys who like to run too, and we just go on a run. Because then it's like I'm doing something that I like anyway. I'm getting to know somebody.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great example. Great idea. So I hear often, and I hear men kind of like sharing this anxiety around, oh, women say that they like funny men, right? And I've had a lot of men tell me like, well, what do I have to be, a comedian or something? Like that's not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So what advice can we give about how to be funny? Because it's a tall order.
Yeah, it's a tall order. I don't think in order to be funny, you have to be necessarily like a funny guy. There are lots of ways to bring a positive energy. And we say this sometimes in presentations. People will say, oh, well, what if I tell a joke, but I'm not funny? It's like, well, you could make an observation. You're on the date and there's something kind of silly or funny happening in your surroundings. Just bring it to their attention and kind of have a lighthearted laugh about it. You could also self-deprecating humor to an extent. Don't go overboard with it. Could work. And then just telling a specific story from your life that maybe was funny or from your week or day. I remember one lawyer in San Francisco I went on a date with. He just that day had been to the eye doctor, and the blue fluid, they put in your eyes for the eye test, had gone everywhere, and he had blue liquid everywhere. And he wasn't actually that funny, but just that story was funny. And we were both laughing. And in that moment, I thought, I want to go out with this guy again. Yeah. So it just could be a silly story.
Yeah. And you still remember this guy.
I still remember
all
it.
These years.
I still remember it because it was a break from that interview feeling. And, we're just like talking as friends. And that's why the power of stories, because it's interesting. They can be funny. It doesn't have to be a joke.
Okay, yeah. So self-deprecating humor to an extent, pointing out, observing what's happening in your immediate surroundings that most people would see as funny.
Yeah.
Was there another thing?
And then sharing specific stories that, hey, they might have a humorous element like that. Yeah, eye doctor story.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, can we talk about ghosting?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I have strong opinions on this.
Yeah, I do too. And I can't tell you how many girlfriends have, I've had heart-to-hearts with them on the phone about some experience they've had where a guy has ghosted them after a somewhat in-depth relationship. And it just feels like it is a real problem these days.
It feels terrible. I get it that it feels more comfortable for the person who's ghosting to just ignore them than have to communicate. But as communication coaches, it is so much better in the long run, even though temporarily it might sting to say, hey, thank you for taking the time to get to know me. I like you. I don't feel like it's a match, or whatever the reason is, but just being honest, it's much better in the long run because you've respected that person. You've been upfront, and then they can move on rather than ghosting. To me feels very disrespectful.
Very disrespectful. And it's not only disrespectful, it causes damage to the other person because it forces them to sit in an uncertain place about what happened. And a lot of women are going to think that it was their fault because that is the nature of
and
men
men,
in general.
it hurts especially when you like somebody and they just ghost you.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, it hurts, but it's better just to be honest. And I would always do that. And I had some men tell me like, wow, at first I was kind of surprised, but I actually was really grateful because then I could just go, okay, that's the situation, or now I know what's going on. And so I think that's as scary as it is just a general best practice.
Yeah. And what do you think about sharing that via text or in person? Are there rules around that?
I think it depends on how long you've been dating, but I think if it's just been a couple dates or one date, a text is totally fine. You do not need to get on the phone to do that. But, if you've been dating someone for a few weeks or a month, then maybe a phone call. I always felt like it doesn't need to be in person. I know people say that, but if it's just been a month or two, I feel like as long as you're talking on the phone, then that's okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think the rules of common decency apply here, where the longer you have been in a
Mm,
relationship with someone, the more effort you need to spend on the conversation, whatever you want to
right,
call
right.
it. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be married to well, I wouldn't be married to someone and then break up with them over a text,
Right, right.
that doesn't work. So I think there's a lot of common sense that applies here,
Mm.
but then again, these are funny times that we're living in. So yeah.
Yeah. But if you know, you know, and just be honest.
Yeah, be honest. I think it reflects really well on you when you are able to speak your truth like that and say, "Hey, I've really enjoyed getting to know you." And here's the thing, using and instead of but. This is
That's a
something
nice
we
idea.
talk about a lot is because but is inherently you're negating what came before. So, oh, I love you, but you didn't take out the trash. So that sounds a bit odd. So instead, using and, right? I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I don't think it's a match.
Yeah.
It lands a little softer than the butt.
Than the butt. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. One of the things that I remember from dating and I hear from people is this is kind of exhausting.
Mm.
You know, of just and then it doesn't work out and you have to start over again and it can feel really exhausting and that can lead you to feel kind of negative.
Mm.
And I remember seeing profiles where it's like a big, litany of all the things that they don't want.
Yes.
What as a communication coach, what would you say about that?
Yeah. Well, number one, it's negative, and negativity doesn't really get you that far.
It's not attractive, right?
It's not attractive, and also it's not shaping anything in the mind of the reader, the listener, to hear what you don't want. If you know what you don't want, you can probably dig a little deeper and find out what you do want. So, an example on my profile is I list not the qualities I'm looking for, but I list what I am looking for in my life. So I am looking for a partner to build something beautiful with, for example. And what I find is that the men who do respond to my profile, they have read that and they're generally, sure, they don't really know me, so they're not ready to like go to the altar or anything, but they at least know where I'm coming from with that. And that somehow we start off on the same page that way.
Yeah, I like that.
Uh-huh.
Framing it as a positive and kind of starting to manifest what you do want. I also like that you're stating where, what you're looking for in the form of like the relationship instead of all these qualities of like must be this, that, because that's also a lot of pressure and off-putting.
I used to do that, and it's interesting. This was years ago, and I had a very specific list, and I shared it with a male friend of mine. I was like, "Hey, can you give me some feedback on my profile?" And he's like, I think that's a little too specific." And so I learned, and I don't do that anymore. I have that list private in my house, but on my dating app, it's more what I want for myself, not what the man needs to
provide. I like that a lot. I remember on my second like official date, once my husband understood that we were dating. He asked me, we were sitting at Lake Merritt in Oakland and having a picnic. And he was like, "What are you looking for?" And I felt like I could be honest. And I said, I want kids and I want this and for my life, kind of like what you were talking about. And he was like, "I do too."
Okay.
So it was really great because we could both be honest and it wasn't like a list of qualities, but it was more of like, hey, we have this shared vision for what we want our future to be. Let's give this a shot, which is exciting.
Yeah. It's a shared direction to move towards, whether you end up together or not. Like you're still getting to know each other, but at least you know that you're traveling the same journey, so to speak.
Yeah, and you're being honest with yourself and what you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.